Hey friends, it's Melanie of Art Studio 320, and this week I have a mission style coffee table, and I'm pretty absolutely certain that the legs are oak, and that means I would like to try a new technique I learned called Ceruse, C-E-R-U-S-E, from Christiana on Bella Renovare. Check her out, she's on YouTube. I really like that technique. It's very cool, it's very popular, and it's good on oak, according to Christiana. I'm gonna try that out. On the top, it's a veneer, so I'm gonna be painting that and a couple other things. There's spindles on the side because it's a mission style piece. I don't have the kind of sander like a Surf Prep or a Festool that I can get into those spindles, so I can hand sand it, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do the technique on that. In fact, I have something else in mind. So don't have a lot of time this week. I'm kind of in a crunch because I've got some things going on this weekend. We'll see how this all turns out. It's going to be kind of fluid, as usual, I guess. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment and press that red button. And you can follow me on Instagram, and you can find me on Etsy, where you will see some of my past projects for sale. So check that out. All of the links for those things will be in the description box below, along with all of the materials that I used this week. Stick around. The finish was cracking very badly when I picked this piece up, so I had to do a little sanding before I cleaned. That's why it looks like it does. And then I wanted to take all these extra little decorative pieces off, doodads if you will. There were a lot of them. You will notice there are a couple long strips, and I did not take those off right here, but I did take them off. I took all of them off. The way to do that is to just use a putty knife or a paint tool and a hammer. Now I'm sanding, but I started with a 120 because I knew that I was dealing with veneer, so I didn't want to go crazy. I went very slowly and worked my way up to a 60 grit. But I knew the legs were solid oak, so I went ahead and started with 60 grit on these. And then I used a 60 grit sanding block for the corners. The finish came off pretty easily. This was not difficult, it just took a little bit of time. Now this cute little tool is an oscillating tool, and I've used it before with a little sanding pad, and I've also used it with a little saw. It's a very handy little, I keep calling it little because look at it, it's so cute. And this was perfect for getting in those small little areas. And now I'm back to my random orbital sander, getting off some glue, and now I'm back to my oscillating tool. Back and forth, sanding. Hey everyone, I just thought I would give you an update on where I'm at with this coffee table. Yesterday was a pretty productive day, as you, I think, saw in the video. If you thought that was productive, I don't know. It was probably more productive in my head because no need to adjust your device. This sound just stopped working on my device. Sorry about that. I was going to tell you what my plans were, but now you'll have to just see what happens. I'm using Goo Gone to help me scrape off the glue. There it is. Came off really easily with the Goo Gone from the veneer. Now we're starting to get into the Ceruse technique. I've got a very stiff wire brush, and I'm pushing, as you can see, with my muscles to wake up that grain. And you're going with the grain, obviously, and you're not scraping or scratching the wood, you're just making grooves where the grain already is. It's crazy, but the harder you push, the better the results will be, you will have created little places to put the paint. So we're going to be painting in just a minute and you'll see what I mean. So for a true Ceruse finish, I'm going to be using white, but honestly, you could use any color paint that you want. You could do any combination of what you want, just as long as you have grooves to put that color. Now this is perfect white, which is perfect for this project. And I'm not using much at all, and I'm going to dilute it because it's going to be more like a wash, but it's really up to you how thin you make it. You do want it thick enough so that it's going to stick into the grooves that you just made with a wire brush. Now I'm using a utility brush to brush it on, and then I'm going to take a clean white rag and I'm going to go against the grain. And the reason I want to go against the grain is because I don't want to just wipe off what I just got into the grooves that I made. You see, I'm struggling. There's a reason for that. I decided to skip a step, and I did it on purpose because I wanted to see if you indeed needed that step. And guess what? You do. That step is to use polyurethane and just a thin coat. You don't need much at all, and you just put it on all the surfaces that you just scraped with a wire brush. And then you're going to go back over all of those places with a wire brush again so that you can get the poly out of the grooves. I know it seems ridiculous, but that's what you do, and it works because it's much easier to wipe off the paint with the poly on there than it is without. And I know because I did an experiment. Now you see me using the wire brush to get the poly out of the grooves. And here is an important stop. The reason I'm using a sander again, I'm using 60 grit, is to get the rest of the paint that didn't come off. So don't panic if the paint isn't coming off as fast as you want. It does come off with the sander. And in all those little spots, I'm using the oscillating tool. But right now, I'm using a wire wheel. I want to see, I bought this, and I wanted to see if it would work more easily than the wire brush. I'd have to say they're about equal, but it probably created a little more texture, the wire wheel did, more than the wire brush. That's my opinion. Here's that oscillating tool again, so I can sand off that paint in the little crevices. Okay, here is my corrugated aluminum. You see that I have gloves on. This stuff was sharp, so I wanted to wear gloves because I didn't want to risk it. Now, I'm trying to cover up the little spindles on the ends of the coffee table. So my husband and I talked it over and decided that it would be best for me to measure 7 3/4 inches, which is exactly an inch bigger, wider than the actual space. Now the space I'm referring to is from top to bottom of the spindles. Now I'm filming this in real time to show you that it takes some time to do, but it isn't difficult. These are called tin snips, and my husband used to use them all the time. You just have to take your time, and you'll see that I start to get the hang of it, and it gets easier and easier, and now I'm going to speed it up because I know it's painful to watch. Sorry about that. I hope your blood pressure didn't go up. So after I marked with my tape measure the 7 3/4 all the way up, I make a lot of marks. I just like to make sure that it's a straight line. And I used a straight edge to create my line. And there you go. I've got my 2 sheets. Now obviously they're way longer than they have to be But first I need to make sure that they're going to fit in that space. So I'm going to cut off that extra little piece, that extra little inch, so that it will fit nice and snug between the top and the bottom of the spindles. Okay, now that I've got the width right, I need to make the length. And I just want that little bit to wrap around on the spindles on the end, and just enough. And this is where Phil comes in, and he's going to use his siding brake, and that just bends the edges. Crazy. That is what that machine does. It's a giant bending machine. Crazy, right? Now what I'm holding is a file. It's a very large file. I don't suggest you use it on your fingernails, but you do need to file down your sharp edges of your metal after you cut it. Okay, I'm making my custom gray, and I'm using Sunday gray and Basilisk black. And Basilisk black has that blue undertone, and you can really see it there. This gray turned out absolutely perfect. One of the keys to mixing paint well is to start out small. Never start out with a large can of paint or a jar of paint. Just use a little bit at a time and then get the color you want. Hey guys, it's I wasn't going to tell you the day anymore. Oh, it's Tuesday. This is what the Ceruse looks like. They aren't very large pieces, but I think it has some nice texture. You saw me working with some metal. So this is corrugated aluminum. It's not super light. It's not like an aluminum can where it's really, really thin. It's thicker than that, but it's pretty light. This is a mission style technique, you know, the rungs, just straight across, very plain. It's a cool style. I've always liked mission style, but if I'm going to redo a piece of furniture, I want to really redo it and make it completely different. I'm also going to be adding these to the corners of the table. One of the reasons I'm doing that is purely practical. The veneer has chipped away at the corners. Instead of trying to repair those, I decided that because I'm adding metal to this area here, why not add some metal to the corners and add a little bit more interest to this table, kind of turn it into more of an industrial looking coffee table. You also saw me mixing my custom color gray, and very pretty. I want this table to look really super cool, so we will see. Stick around. I'm using Bin Zinsser primer. It's a shellac, and it's really good to prevent bleed through. Wasn't sure if this would be a bleed through piece, but why not? Now here's my paint. I'm using a fan brush, Zibra fan brush here. Went on very nicely. I have to say I really like it. It's got a nice blue undertone to it. It's very pretty gray. Okay, if you refinish furniture, you'll appreciate this little fancy move I make. I had the table up on another table so I could work on it, but then I had to get it on the ground, and it was kind of heavy. And I'm not even an engineer, so I'm impressed with myself. Okay, I've got plastic around the bottom with the blue tape. I think it's by Scotch. And so I'm not getting paint on the rest of my piece. My sprayer was not behaving, and I discovered that night that the little straw that goes down into the paint cup was not attached properly, so there was air coming through. I think that's what the problem was. Yes, you see what you see. I am using a 60 grit sandpaper to create a brushed look on my metal. And I got that idea from my son, who did the same thing on his motorcycle tank. It looked very cool. It does look cool. Now I'm getting ready to put the top coat on, and I'm just going over it with a 220 sandpaper, and then I'm using a tack cloth to wipe off the dust. I did tint my polyurethane because I had paint left in the cup. It was just less time at the sink, that's all. Okay, here I'm just painting the little pegs that go into all the holes of all the things that I took off. Now I'm putting a little bit of hardware on, so hey, this is the end because I'm down to the hardware. I am using a impact driver and a drill first I'm using the drill. I used a little tapper to create a little dent so that I would know where to drill the holes. There it is. I'm using that with a hammer just to tap a dent, and then I'm drilling down with a very, very tiny little drill bit to create holes for my screws. And those screws they're called hex head self-tapping screws. Don't ask me. Now the screws have little blades at the end so that they will go into the wood. They look kind of weird. They look sort of medieval, actually. So here I am. Now I'm drilling a hole. So I'm pre-drilling before I put those medieval screws in so that they will go in a little bit more easily. This took a little doing because I called this a silencer. It looked like a silencer on a gun. I don't have a gun, but that's what it reminded me of. But the reason it's so long is so that I can get the drill into that little space. Actually, it's a driver. Sorry, I went back and forth from a drill to a driver. Impact driver, actually. So here I am again. I'm pre-drilling, and I'm doing it on a little bit of an angle. And notice I'm keeping my fingers out of the way. You gotta make sure you don't have your hand anywhere near where you're gonna be, because in case you slip, you don't want your hand to be where that drill is or the impact driver. There's my little silencer. So we decided that we would put 2 screws in the front, and we went, there was an uneven amount of spindles, so I had to be real careful how I did that. But yeah, it worked. 3 spindles in, or rungs, whatever you want to call them. Okay, now this is called I have a little notepad because there's so many things that I use. This is a self-centering drill bit. And that was cool. Did you hear? I said, ooh. I'd never used it before. It was a very cool tool. Phil was excited for me to use it because you don't have to worry about centering your drill right in the center of that hole, because that self-centering piece does it for you, and the drill comes down out of there. It was very cool. And then you just go and you put your screws in, just like that. Those were just normal flathead screws. They weren't medieval looking. So I had to keep going back and forth, switching, and it was fun, actually. I love those tools. I ended up sanding the little pegs a little bit so they'd look more like the rest of the wood, and just glued them and hammered them in. They look pretty good. Well, all my YouTube peeps, that is all I have for you this week. I'm a little punchy. You know, when you look at a coffee table and you think, how in the world am I going to turn this into something different and cool and something somebody would want to buy? Because there just wasn't that much to work with. I think we did a good job, and I say we because my husband Phil is my sounding board, so I bounce ideas off of him. He kind of helps me through the carpentry of it all, and man, I have learned so much, you guys. I have to say, tools, and I'm sure I've said this before, but tools are super empowering. I don't know how men feel when they work with tools because they've always been able to work with tools. And I just have never felt like that was something I was allowed to use. And when I was a kid, I had a hammer and a screwdriver, and that's about it. And I think my dad thought that that was progressive, and I guess it was at the time. But yeah, I am really grateful that my husband is willing to share his trade with me. And the more I do, the more I am impressed by all of the things that he has accomplished over his lifetime and will continue to accomplish. Yeah, and maybe that sounds weird to some of you, but I bet there's a lot of you that can relate to this. If you haven't picked up a power tool before, I seriously encourage you to do that. And if you don't know what you're doing, make sure that you find someone that can help you with that. And I mean, watching videos will help too. I hope that my videos are helpful in that way. It may seem silly, but it's really a good feeling. Putting on that metal with the driver and just, I mean, it just, I don't know. I loved it. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that this encourages you to try something new, because that's my challenge for the week. I don't usually give you a challenge, but I'm challenging you on your next project to go beyond just painting it, and really, if there's something that you really want to do, try and figure it out. And I know how that feels. So overwhelming. Find someone that you can bounce ideas off of. You can bounce ideas off of me. Leave a comment and I will I'll answer you. Yay! Thanks to all you subs out there, because I have reached 500. I am halfway to my very first goal. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. See you next time.
You move, this isolation got me feeling like